well accept it. Might as well accept it that well, it's the weather's rough. Might as well enjoy it.
The weather's
right?
going to do what the weather wants to
Right. Might as well accept it. And that comes down to what I really wanted to talk about today, which is patience. Right? Patience is a word that like most words that we learn in the vocabulary, we tend to learn them by the way that other people convey them to us, like by the way that other people tell them to us. And so most of the time as kids, if we learn the word patience, it's always wait patiently, sit there patiently, etc., etc. So when I ask people, both kids and adults alike in our classes, what they think patience means, they almost always say, well, it means to wait. And I say, no, actually, it doesn't. It means to accept things calmly, right? So you can show patience by waiting, which is accepting the situation and staying calm about it and not worrying about it. That's one way to show patience. But to be honest, when I learned the real definition of patience, it absolutely changed my life. Like, absolutely changed my life. And I'm still not always good about the practice of it, but I find that practicing patience really changed my life if you think about it in terms of what it actually means, which is to accept things calmly, accept things in a calm manner. And I think one of the first things I did when I first learned this about acceptance is I realized how many thoughts in my own head about myself, or degrading, what it's called, a degrading inner monologue, right, towards myself. I would be mean to myself. How many of those phrases and terms and words that I used that were negative about myself, that were not my own, but were actually opinions and thoughts that other people had about me that I accepted and let implant on my subconscious, right? So as kids, we look up to our parents first. That's usually the first person, or grandparents, some family member. It's usually the first person we look up to, right? So as a child, I looked up to my parents, and at least one of my parents often put me down for my ideas, often put me down for my thoughts. And I found myself being, early 20s at the time, going, wow, how much of what I think is my own opinion about myself is not actually my opinion about myself. It was their opinion about me. Their opinion about me began to rule what I thought about myself, right? And when I realized that, I decided that what I was first going to have to do is accept that those degrading thoughts I had about myself were not my own. Those were thoughts and opinions of other people, and separate those from myself, if that makes sense, because too many of us walk around thinking negatively about ourselves or things about ourselves that were implanted in our minds by someone we that didn't treat us right, whether it be a parent or a bully at school, or maybe you met one of your idols and they put you down, and so you begin to think that those things are true about yourself. But the fact of the matter is you have to separate that and accept the fact that those are other people's thoughts and opinions and do not have to be your own. The only person that lives in your head for your entire life, the only person you will know for your entire life, and the only person that you can actually know well is yourself. You cannot know anyone else nearly as well as you think you can. You cannot, and none of those people, you will not ever live with those people for your entire life, right? Those people will not be around you every second of every day your entire life. The only person that needs to be happy with you is you. No one else necessarily has to be happy with you. Though, if you live with virtue, you live with good character, that's a way that you can make yourself happy with yourself, right? If you live in a way that you see as admirable. The side effect of that, when you focus on yourself and living in a way that you see as admirable, the side effect is that other people will begin to see you that way too. But no one else is going to see you for what you are until you see yourself for what you are. So if you see yourself as an admirable person and you start taking leaps and strides in your life to become that admirable person, to act in that admirable way, then other people will begin to see you as admirable. But other people are not going to see you in that way until you accept yourself as that way and begin to live that way. So we tend to do this backwards. We have this tendency to think of ourselves in terms of what other people think of us or what other people say about us, and therefore we become the reality that other people speak, when it should be the other way around. What we should be doing is coming up with who we are, becoming aware of ourselves, and accepting ourselves for that first, and then other people can begin to accept us for that as well.
Yes. You rounded back into my recap. I was going to say, so we need to have patience with ourselves before we can gain patience and acceptance, or even want to gain patience and acceptance from others.
Right. Now, here's the part that changed my life. Other than that, right? That was the first step. That was step one. The other part that changed my life about patience was, and this is something I still have to work very hard on, but learning to be very careful about discerning what I can control from what I cannot control. And whatever I cannot fully control, like, of course I can influence all kinds of things, but whatever I cannot fully control, learning to accept that I can't control it, that's just the way that is right now, gives me a chance to be able to actually do something about it in a much better way. So here's how I learned to differentiate it. When I learned to say, okay, the only thing that is 100% fully in my control is me. The way that I react to a situation, the way that I respond to a situation, the virtues that I find important and attempt to practice in my life, those are the only things in my control. Everything else, the outcomes of my actions, the consequences, the different situations that happen to me, things along those lines, are not ever going to be fully in my control, right? And I always found that was a really important thing that helped change my life, because so much of our time is spent trying to control things that we can't, and putting a lot of focus into controlling things that we don't have 100% control over, right? The only thing we have 100% control over is literally ourselves, and yet we spend a vast majority of time in our life stressing and worrying about things that, yes, maybe they have something to do with us, but about things that we literally cannot do anything about right now. Like, how many people do you know watch the news every night and get angry and yell at it and get frustrated and want to vent and constantly, yeah, I mean, sure, there's some things that might affect me and there's some things that might be upsetting on that, but if there's literally nothing in my control about that, the only part of that in my control is who I vote for, right? That's it. And so why would I waste the energy stressing and frustrating myself and constantly working through these negative emotions on something like that when it is absolutely outside of my control to start with, right? Why not concern myself with me first? Why not concern myself with my character, how I act, and then accept whatever comes as if that's just what's going to happen. Like, I put out a video on Instagram the other day that was like, as Seneca once put it, this old philosopher, this ancient philosopher, as he once put it, when the body is corrupted by an easy life or too much pleasure or something like that, then every little difficulty we faced is going to seem more unbearable. Not because the difficulties we face are actually unbearable, but because we had become soft from an easy life. And fact of the matter is life is full of setbacks. Life is full of things going wrong. You do not have full control over everything that happens around you. That's the beauty of the world. You don't have full control over these things. You can have control over yourself, which can then in turn influence events, right? But you cannot control those events themselves. So if you act in a certain way that you hope influences a certain outcome and you don't get that outcome, it's easy to get frustrated and upset about that, because somewhere deep down you thought that you had some amount of control over that outcome, but you really didn't. The only thing you had control over is the influence that you put towards it. You never had control over whether that was what you hoped for was going to come out of it or not. So when you can learn, and when I learned to begin to differentiate between exactly what I can control, which is really just me, and what I can't control, using patience to accept the things that I can't control. Guys, they use this in the Serenity Prayer, right? Like AA meetings. This is a very important part of cognitive behavioral therapy as well. Learning to differentiate what's in our control and what is not, because too much of our time is spent being frustrated and upset about stuff that we are never going to be able to do anything about. The only thing we can do anything about is us and how we respond to that situation and our actions. So when I look at other people, for example, I like to say no one else should have the ability to make me angry. That should be a choice that I keep for myself. No one should have the ability to make me angry. So how can I make myself in such a way that other people can't make me angry? Well, I can accept that whatever their actions, thoughts, and words are about me or about any of my situations are their own, and I have no control over that. That's in their control. I have no control over that. So I can be a lot more happy and content in dealing with people that I have conflict with when I can accept the fact that they are the ones in control of their thoughts and actions. I can't control that, and it's not in my place to control that. I can say my piece, and maybe that influences them and maybe it doesn't, but it shouldn't matter, right? It shouldn't matter. The only thing I should worry about is how can I express myself in an admirable way, in an honorable way, right? Using courtesy, respect. For me, it's using courtesy, respect, and compassion. How can I present myself in that way? And then how can I also accept that that's just the way they think, that's just the way they are, and that's fine with me, right? Like, because it's not my job to change them. It is not my job to live their life. It is their job, right? Just like it is not their job to control my life. And therefore, why would I let them control my life by thinking the thoughts that they want me to think about myself? If someone wants me to think negatively about myself, they're trying to convince me that I'm nothing, that I'm not worth it, then, well, that's their opinion. It does not have to be my opinion. I do not have to adopt that. I can accept that that's their opinion, and I can just go, well, that's someone I don't want to spend a lot of time around. They're going to drag me down. I can accept that, and I can change my action, right? But I can't control them. So there's no point in getting frustrated and worked up about what somebody else thinks or about situations I can't control. There's no point in getting frustrated and angry when a setback comes my way, because that's just part of life, right? Now any setback, now that's my opportunity. I talked about this in our last podcast about framing effect. Now, that's my opportunity to show my self-control, to show my ability of self-discipline and my ability to recognize what I can control and what I can't, and to accept what I can't control and work within those boundaries. And that's what we call life, essentially, correct?
Yeah. And when it comes to setbacks, I've always, and I know this didn't always work for you, you're getting more to this kind of step-by-step thing as you've accepted patience, but I have... When I found myself, as I was younger, stressing about things that were out of my control, I made myself a checklist. And I went, okay, have I done everything in my control to deal with this situation right now? If all my answers were yes, if I had done absolutely everything within my control to deal with this setback, then I would say, okay, now I'm going to go till tomorrow. And then I'm going to look at everything I can do until tomorrow. Because sometimes the things I would do would be reach out to other people. Mm-hmm. And then I have to wait for them to get back with me. I can't do anything else. Yep. You know, and so I still use this checklist. Have I gone through every step I can?
Well, and what's funny about that checklist is that's actually a common practice in modern cognitive behavioral therapy, but they weren't the original ones that came up with it. The therapists that used this for cognitive behavioral therapy, a modern psychologist was not the person that came up with this. That practice was actually originally invented in around the year 200 to 300 BC by a group of philosophers, a school of philosophy called Stoicism, right? They are actually the first ones that came up with several practices that are used in cognitive behavioral therapy today. Their philosophy was entirely built on that the only thing that you control is yourself, and the only thing that makes a good life is being a good person or living virtuously, right? So that was a philosophy that I 100% agree with their way of thinking, right? That philosophy was all about you can be a good person without having a lot of wealth, without having a lot of influence. Like you can be a good person just through living with virtue. You do not have to have accomplished a ton of things. You just have to have been a good person and influence those around you in that way, right? But whether you influence those around you or not, that's not in your control, you know? And so I want to go back to why do we get these negative thoughts about ourselves? Why do we get these opinions? Well, sometimes it's a parent that maybe unintentionally hurt our feelings or put us down and made us feel a certain way. Maybe it's something to do with our idols, or maybe it's comparing ourselves to someone else that we know. Can we keep in mind, everyone always puts their best foot forward. Everyone, like, even if they're not faking it and wearing masks, everyone is still always putting their best foot forward socially. So if you compare yourself to someone else, you're not actually comparing yourself to them. You're comparing yourself to their best foot forward, right? So the only way to make that fair is if you're going to compare your best foot forward to their best foot forward, not what you know about you to what they know. Thank you, Jamal.
Stop with the bromance, Jamal. This is about me, okay? Accept that.
All right, so another thing I wanted to bring up on that, though, is why it's important to, like, not meet your idols, right? Or why it's important to accept that their thoughts and their emotions and their opinions are probably going to be different than yours, right? We do this with parents, too. Of course, obviously, you meet your parents, so that happens sometimes when you're younger. Most of us. But the point I was trying to say is I've met a few of my idols in the past, and I found myself weeks later still frustrated and upset at like them putting down my ideas or putting down the things I wanted to build on what they started and things along those lines. This happened with several idols that I met. Matter of fact, there's only one person ever that I've looked up to and actually met that lived up to that reputation 100% and was actually better, was actually like way cooler than his reputation, and that was Bill Superfoot Wallace, famous kickboxer from the 70s. He is an amazing guy. He was one of the few, the only idol I've ever met that actually lives up to it, that actually is like a really good guy, and that's amazing. But like I said, I want to bring this back around to patience, though. Patience, like I said, changed my life when I realized that it has nothing to do with waiting. It has to do with being calm. It has to do with accepting a situation calmly. Now, that doesn't mean you're not going to get a little feeling of frustration or anxiety or fear or whatever. Those are completely normal nuances. But to be able to have the discipline to stay calm through that and not let it build to anger or something bigger, and instead stay calm and accept that, okay, well, this is the situation right now. I can't change that this is the situation right now. So what can I, but I can control myself. So what are the things that I can do about it? And if anything I'd like to happen is outside of my control, and it's not something I can do, it's only something I can influence, then I can take some steps that way without hoping too hard that I'm going to get the outcome I want. So what I mentioned Stoicism earlier, what they like to call this is the preferred indifference versus unpreferred indifference is essentially what it comes down to, which is like to consider that the only thing you can compare good and bad to is yourself. Is my action good or is my action bad? You cannot, and they would say you cannot put that on somebody else. You can't say whether someone else's action is good or bad because their perspective is entirely different and their actions and situations are their own, and so therefore none of your business to try to control, right? So that's essentially what they said about that. So I forgot where I was going with that. So the only thing that's you're in control of is your action. That's all you should worry about. And is your action good? Is your action bad? And then the other side of that was that they would say, well, no thing that happens to you, no situation or thing is necessarily bad or good by nature. Instead, they differentiated as preferred indifferent or unpreferred indifferent. Like it would be preferred to have wealth, but not necessary. It would be unpreferred to have bad health. But these things can still happen in life. Therefore, they can be preferred or unpreferred. But if we think that we deserve them or something along those lines, then when something goes wrong, we're going to start feeling like nature and the world personally attacked us rather than accepting that this is how the world works. Sometimes you have bad health. Sometimes you make money. Sometimes you lose money. Sometimes right? And so to be able to accept that and recognize that none of those things are actually an indicator of your own character. None of those things are actually an indicator of how good of a person you are or how bad of a person you are. We've all known broke people who were mean, and we've all known broke people who were amazingly kind. We've all known rich people who were jerks, and we've all known rich people who are amazing philanthropists who are really, really great people, right? It is not any of those things that makes a good person. What makes a good person is, do they live by the virtues they see as important? Now, I'm not saying they have to live by the same virtues as anybody else. What I'm saying is, if they think respect is important, are they living that in a non-hypocritical way? Meaning that, are they showing respect across the board, right? Because the only thing in your control is your own actions and character. So therefore, you can control how you respond to somebody respectfully or with compassion or with kindness or with integrity or whatever the things are that are important to you, but you cannot control whether they respond to you in the same way. And when you can accept that, you can be a much more calm when you're dealing with people who do not have the same values as you. It's much more easy to remain calm when you remember that your virtues are under your control, their virtues are under their control. However they act, that's on them, not on you, and it is not your responsibility to change them or react in an emotional or certain way. It is only your responsibility to react in a way that fits what you consider to be admirable and honorable. So that's one of the things I kind of like about the Stoic philosophy, is they didn't have a way of living that everyone strived to live for. Each person had to find what was important to them and live to that. They didn't that's a philosophy that never told anyone how to live. They just told everyone that you need to find what you see as admirable and noble and live by that.
So you mean they had to figure out what kind of person they were?
They had to figure out what kind of person they were and what kind of person they wanted to be. You had to become self-aware. But a big part of this, like I say, a big part of what changed my life is patience. Absolutely. Is learning to try to accept the world for the way it is, to accept the bad with the good, to look for the silver lining, and to accept bad things that happen to me. And I try to do it with a sense of excitement. So if something bad happens, some unpreferred situation happens, I try to react to it calmly, or with even maybe a little bit of excitement, because this is an opportunity to show off strength of character. This is an opportunity to show off my creativity. This is an opportunity to show off my problem solving skills. This is an opportunity to show off my whatever, right? Because the fact of the matter is there's no point in getting upset when things don't go your way, because you're always going to have times things don't go your way. So if you leave it, if you decide not to use patience, you decide to not accept those things, then you're leaving your entire emotional being, your entire emotional state up to fate. You're leaving your entire emotional state up to whatever happens. You're leaving your entire emotional state up to whoever you come in contact with, up to however they decide to act. But if you really want to ever take control of your emotional state, you do that through patience, right? Patience can help solve, much. I'm talking about like 80% of emotional distress. And I sincerely believe that. 80% emotional distress is caused by the inability to differentiate what we can control and what we cannot control. And trying to spend time exerting control over something we were never going to have control over, and wasting time doing that, which was energy that could have been spent on the things we can control. But if we spend all our energy on the things we can't control, what happens to the things we can control? We tend to take them for granted. We tend to throw them out, right? So if we have certain virtues that we find important to us, but then we start focusing on the things we can't control, which are going to be frustrating, by the way, because you're never going to be able to fully control that, then you tend to start to act in a way that lets go of the things that you thought you found important. You know what I mean? So holding on to those things that you can't control allows you to live the life of what you feel like is a good person without being thrown out of that virtue by somebody else's thoughts, somebody else's actions, or even a situation that happens to you. Now, I know a lot of people say, well, that's easier said than done. Like, look, I get it. It is easier said than done. But I am not speaking from a place of having, a silver platter in front of me my whole life. I was homeless at 16. Like, I worked for everything I got. Like, I had to make my way up. I mean, Jamal's watching on Instagram. He met me in college. He knows what I'm talking about. He met me right after my homeless. I went to college to not be homeless. That's the whole reason I went to college. I had a full ride scholarship, and I went to a college far enough away that I got a dorm thing, like a dorm voucher. That's the only reason I went to college, so I didn't have to be homeless anymore. Like, right? Like, that's pretty much what made my decision for me, So I'm not saying these things from a place of a silver platter where it's like, well, that's easy for you to say, you've never been broke, you've never been homeless, you never had to survive and do what you have to. No, I'm saying it from exactly that place. I'm saying that that's what helped me get out of that place. Was when I was homeless, fact of the matter is I didn't see it as the world, I don't want to say the words I'm thinking of, messed me over, right? I don't want to say the world messed me over, right? I didn't look at it that way. I looked at it as, these are the cards I was dealt, what am I going to do with it, right? Because, and honestly, I was better about it then than I am now. But when I was homeless, I recognized all this. I recognized that I had to accept what happened to me, and I had to look for the good sides, and that the only thing I could control is what I did with it. And I recognized that when I was homeless, and by recognizing that, I was able to focus on myself, and I was able to, what would you say, like make allies in a way, right? Who could help me out with certain things, stuff like that. I would consider Jamal one of those. I was able to make allies. I was able to make some friends with people that could help me out, and things along those lines. And I was able to calmly weigh logically each step along the way of what if I do this, 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 right? And by being able to unemotionally, just logically accept this is where I'm at and look at all the different possibilities that I could potentially go through, it was much easier for me to find a path where no paths seemed to exist. Which means if I'd have got frustrated and emotional and blamed the world, I would have felt like there was no path for me. Well, I'm just homeless. Everyone wants to hold me down. I can only make $6 an hour, which is what I was making at the time, right? And I'd have just felt like that was it. But when I was able to accept that situation was what it was, I was able to take the emotions of blaming the world out of it. And once I was able to take the emotions out of it, I was much more creative in my search for a path out of homelessness, in my search for a path to an actual life. And then I became excited to walk down that path rather than feeling like I was fighting an uphill battle. Because once I hit the bottom, I was truly able to accept life. I was truly able to accept things once I hit the bottom. Once you get to a certain point, you get to a point where you're able to kind of accept it, or you don't. And when you don't accept it, that's what causes that long-term poverty. You know what I mean? That long-term homelessness and stuff like that. But I was able to accept it, and that allowed me to begin looking for different paths. And I was able to creatively find a path out that led to where I'm at today. Now, when I started that path, could I have foreseen starting a business, being a martial artist, or any of those things? No. But I was able to find a path that I could take one step at a time down and accept whatever happened through that path. And the parts of it that I felt like I couldn't accept, like I don't like this in my life, this isn't what I want for my life, then I would still accept them for what they were right now and accept that I didn't like it. And that would allow me to look logically for what is the path out of this situation? What is the path to improve this situation? Whether that's a job change or whatever it might be, a change of housing, right? Something along those lines. But it all started with patience. You're looking at me like you got something to say.
No, I'm not. I'm looking at the child rocking the chair behind you, but he's not sitting in the chair. And I'm trying to be patient about this.
Well, be patient about
I
it.
am.
He's not in your control. His actions are in his own control. The only thing you can control is your response to his action.
Which I put my foot on the chair.
Right. Anyway, I know it sounds like a simple concept, and I know I've said it over and over again, but fact of the matter is I watch people a lot, and I watch people in my life constantly say they understand this sort of thing, right? And then at the same time constantly get upset about things that are not in their control. The thing about differentiating what's in your control and what's not, the biggest part of that is that patience to not let yourself get upset and frustrated and over the top about something that is literally nothing you can do anything about, right? And the thing about it is when I was homeless, I like to laugh about this. I tell people, when people start getting real political with me and big on their political stance, I tell them, you know what, I was homeless once. And they always look at me weird, like, what does that have to do with anything? I say, well, when you're homeless, you're in survival mode, right? And fact of the matter is you recognize that you have no power. When you're homeless and you have nothing, you recognize that you have no real power over anything in the world. And so you just kind of accept politicians and politics for what they are, and you tend to kind of ignore them and be like, well, they're going to do what they're going to do, and I'm going to do what I need to do to survive. And honestly, I found, as I look back on that, that was a far healthier way at looking at politics and life than I see most people deal with today. You know, recognizing that there's no point in getting frustrated that old president said something you didn't like, and there's no point in getting frustrated about it. You can't change that. The only thing you can change is maybe who you vote for next time, right? That's it. That's literally your only amount of control. So that should be the only part you really concern yourself with, right?
Yeah, and in the end, there's not much point in getting frustrated with most people anyway.
Yeah.
Because they're not going to understand or care.
They're not going to change for you.
They're not.
Unless they love you.
Yeah.
So fact of the matter is no one cares what you know until they know that you care. So therefore, until you're very close with somebody, you're never going to have the influence to change their mind. No. You're not. Not until you're very, very close with them and they feel like you care about them. Are you ever going to have any kind of influence over them to change their opinion or the way they think about anything? And honestly, you shouldn't be trying to change their opinion. I mean, you can express your own opinion. That's not what I'm saying. You can obviously share yours. But if you're sharing yours in the attempt to change somebody else's, then you're going to set yourself up for frustration because their opinion's not in your control. The only thing that's in your control is how you influence them, or in other words, how you state your opinion in a kind, compassionate, and respectful manner. Now, I've had several times when I've disagreed with somebody and I've said it in such a way that at the end they were like, well, you know, we have a difference of opinion, but I can respect the fact that you argue very nicely. Like you're very respectful about your disagreements. And I was like, well, yeah, because there's no point in escalating it. Why would I fight you over a disagreement? Why would I escalate this to something physical because we don't agree on something? That makes no sense. Because fact of the matter is all of us as humans, animals, and otherwise, we all have our own experience, our own perspective, and our own influences on the world, right? And like I say, the only thing you can control is how, you know, accepting that, right? So when I run across somebody who has a differing opinion than me, I don't see them as the enemy. I don't see them as the opposite. I still see them as a human, just like me. I still see them as having the same amount of power and influence in the world as I do, which is next to none, right? So,
and none of us need to be in an echo chamber,
right?
None of us do.
Right, and so I'm able to do this, and I'm able to keep calm and just state my position calmly while also accepting their position because it doesn't bother me emotionally that they feel differently than I do, right? I don't see them as the enemy. I see them as just another person with a different perspective, and it's much easier for me to accept them for that and stay calm in a disagreement with them. You know what I mean?
And it's 100% okay to let people know that you're losing your patience and your calm before you actually do.
Right,
So,
and that's another thing I had to learn is like if I find the frustration starting to build in my chest to the point that it might become an outburst, I found that I have to say, please, give me a moment. I am having a little trouble with emotional control right now. I'm having a little trouble with my self-discipline right now, and things along those lines.
if
right?
this keeps going, I will lose my patience entirely.
Well, and the best way to practice patience is self-discipline, right? So when you talk about patience, learning to accept things the way they are, this, that, and the other, you can obviously take steps to try to learn how to do that. But when I was going through, as I'm still going through the learning process of doing that, I found that one of the most helpful things you can do is start exerting control over other parts of your life, not because it's good for you, but simply to prove that you can control it. So meaning that, let's say you do a healthy diet thing. Maybe you do. I did a vegetarian 14 days not long ago, right?
It was like 21.
21. Yeah, I ended up doing like a third week, right? But the point of it was not to lose weight. The point of it was not to be healthier. Those are after effects. Those are great after effects and that sort of thing. But try it for 3 days or a week, like only drinking water or only eating healthy or something like that. And fact of the matter is, don't do it to lose weight. Don't do it to be healthy. Do it to prove to yourself that you have enough self-discipline to choose the virtues you find important and try to figure out how to live by them in each and everything that happens in your life, right? So for me, patience is one of them, right?
Yeah.
But if I go straight to practicing patience, sometimes it can be very difficult. And when I grade myself at the end of the day, I could be like, oh, I failed at my patience on this thing, and I failed at my patience on this thing. But what I found is the more aspects of your life that you try to exert self-control over simply for the act of exerting self-control over them, not with any other goal in mind, then the easier it becomes to go back to your practices of respect or patience or compassion or whatever virtues you want to practice. The easier it makes it to keep those in mind and be mindful about them throughout your day. Like I say, it's easier to be mindful about them if you're also being mindful about another goal and remembering that the only reason you're doing it is not to reach a goal, but rather to prove that you have the self-discipline to do it, to prove that you have a higher level of self-control than you once thought you had. One way to do that, like I say, only drink water for 3 days. Another way to do, eat too. Another way to do that is only eat healthy, like take a vegetarian diet for 1 week or 2 weeks. See if you have that level of self-discipline. You know what I mean? Because your body will feel weird at first. It'll feel tired, it'll feel upset. But your body will adjust to it after 4 days. Your body will adjust to it. Like when I did the vegetarian thing, let me talk about this. So I only did it as an aspect of self-control, right? I didn't do it to be healthy. But what I noticed was it kind of sucked for 4 days. After that 4th day passed, I was just used to it. And it was just enjoyable like any other thing. Then when I stopped, I was much more easily able to tell what foods didn't make me feel good, what foods made me sick to my stomach, what foods drug the energy out of me, what foods made me sleepy, what foods made me feel good, and what foods made me not feel good. By the time I was done with that and then I started eating regular again, it was much more easy for me to realize, well, maybe part of the reason I felt like crap for the past 5 years was my diet, because every time I eat these particular things, I feel lethargic and I feel tired and I feel sick to my stomach. So maybe I should stop eating those things. You know what I mean? And then you know you have the self-discipline to do that because you've already shown that you have the self-discipline to follow an even more strict diet for a week before that. And once you follow that strict diet and then you let your body acclimate to it and then you go back to eating other things, it's much easier to realize just how much some of those unhealthy foods affect us in a negative way.
Yeah. And, training yourself in patience and calm is...
It's mental training. All of this is mental training.
It is, and it is a step-by-step, just like anything else. And so one of the first things, like I said a minute ago, that you should start with is, one, understanding your emotions. So figuring out before you get to that point that you need to communicate with those around you, this is the problem. Therefore, they can help you and treat you with respect. And that's one thing that I do with the Tigers in my class, is we start Patience Week, and I'm like, all right, guys, I have a patience meter. We talk about it all the time. We're talking about it real hard this week, so my patience meter starts full, but every time you talk without raising your hand and being called on, what happens? Your patience meter goes down.
Right. But the thing is if you try to accept the fact that your patience has a limit, then your patience will always have a limit. If you accept that your patience can be boundless, then your patience can be boundless.
This is true.
So the fact of the matter is you should not limit yourself. You should not limit yourself, because that gives you an easy out and a justification for not living by the characteristics and virtues that you think are important. So in my opinion, I feel like you should look at this in the attempt to be boundless with it, not to have a
If I may continue.
Yeah.
It is boundless, because I say, well, what happens when you start raising your hands and using your voices again? It goes up. So it never gets empty. They always get to rebound back.
And this is it. I'm not trying to hit on your lesson. It is a good lesson for the kids. At the same time, you don't want to put the power of your patience in anyone else's hands. Therefore, their actions should not actually affect your patience in any way, shape, or form. Their actions should not lower or raise your meter in any way, shape, or form. When we're doing this for ourselves, what we really want is to make it so that our level of patience, our level of respect, our level of compassion is not changed by anyone else's actions and behavior. It does not go up and does not go down. The idea is to be able to accept it. Now, if it is one of those things that you feel that you're losing it, removing yourself from that situation rather than expecting someone else to change for you is sometimes a better way to go. So like removing yourself and spending less time with the people that seem to trigger you, that can be very, very helpful, right? So you can remove yourself from those situations, and that's often, in my opinion, a better way to go about it, right? I understand the lesson, though, and that is a great way to explain it to kids, because other people are going to have a level, a meter essentially with other people. But I think the goal when we're working on self-improvement is to make that boundless, essentially, right? And when you're trying to do these things, this mental training can be very difficult to do for yourself. But if you can find somebody to model that you admire, look up to, that you can talk to, that's great. But if you can't, there's a really great practice you can do. You can find a hero from a book that you've read or a movie that you like that is like your favorite hero, right? That lives very admirably in your opinion. And then every time you come up with a situation that tests your patience or something like that, you can ask yourself, what would that person do? Or essentially create the model human being in your head, the perfect human, which obviously doesn't exist, and then ask yourself what they would do, right? Christians do this all the time. Religions do this all the time. What would this person do, right? And that's a simple way to give yourself your own teacher, if that makes sense, right? That's always following you. And again, like I say, trying not to blame situations that happen to you or things that other people think, trying not to blame that on anybody is a big part of acceptance, but rather just accept it as part of nature right now, the nature that is surrounding you right now, right? Anyway, we went probably way off topic several times. It's been a little while. So any other questions or comments or anything before we jump off here? Oh yeah, and we are closed tonight.
Yes.
No classes tonight.
Email,
if anyone
notifications,
forgot.
all that stuff will be going out.
Yep.
As soon as we're off here.
Yep, absolutely. Mr. Axel, do you have anything you wanted to add?
No, sir.
He says no. All right. Nothing about what's patience mean?
Patience means accepting.
Accepting. That's it.
Waitingly.
Waiting. Yeah, no. When you say that patience means to wait, what you're essentially saying is that when waiting patiently is to wait waitingly. Yes, that's what she said.
And if I don't like how he's acting, I'm just going to stand here and wait waitingly for him to change.
Yeah, well, the fact of the matter is that, but that goes against everything that I've been talking about.
It does.
The fact of the matter is to learn to be calm, to learn to accept things as they are, so that you can be calm and relatively unemotional in most situations, right? So if you are allowing someone else's actions to affect your emotions, then that would be getting a low grade in your ability to accept them for how they are and who they are. Now, at the same time, you can accept someone for how they are and who they are and still just not be able to stand being around them or not like actions. Well, in that case, remove yourself from those people. And spend less time with those people. You know what I mean? The only time that becomes a real issue is when you live with that person, and then sometimes counseling can help. Just open communication can often help, because those are times when you live with somebody, you can't remove yourself from the actions that hurt you. You know what I mean? Or that feel like they hurt you. The best you can do is try not to let them hurt you. But then sometimes that becomes a sadness, right? That becomes a sadness for the miscommunication and lack of connection between you and the person that you live with. But now we're getting into a whole nother concept. But it all has to do with patience, right? Learning to accept things as they are. And that's what patience is really about. So if this is something like, if you get tired of feeling frustrated all day, feeling angry all day, being easily frustrated by seeing something on Facebook or seeing something on the news, or being easily triggered by something anybody says, then this might be something that you want to try to practice. This might be something that you can try to implement. And like I said, the first thing is you have to learn how to differentiate what's in your control and what's not. Put your care into things that are in your control, and the things that are not, let that go. Let it go and accept patience that it's not in your control. And if you can accept that, then you can start lowering the emotional toll that it has on you. But like I say, the first step to that for me was accepting that a lot of the negative thoughts I had about myself weren't necessarily my own thoughts like I thought they were. They were thoughts and ideas implemented on me by bullies, by society, by people I looked up to that thought I was nothing. And when I realized that, then I was able to, every time I think like that, I'm able to go, yeah, but that's not me. That's Miss Ritter from the second grade. That's not me. That's old Johnny that picked on me in third grade. That's not me. Oh, that's my mother when I was 7 years old talking. And when I can learn to separate that internal voice that's being mean to me and realize that that is just somebody else's voice, and I can learn to separate that and accept that that is somebody else's voice, then I can ask myself, what do I want my voice to sound like? What do I want to think of myself in this situation? How would I want to respond to this situation? You know, how do I want to feel in this situation? And then how can I take action that shows that virtue, that gives me the ability to feel the way I want in that situation? But the second I start giving control of my emotions to other people and to things around me, the second I start letting advertisements in the news and my neighbors and political parties and et cetera, start affecting my emotional state, now I'm a slave to them. I become under their control, and anyone can control me by controlling my emotions. Because you control someone's emotions, you control their thoughts. So if you let all these other sources control your emotions, you're also letting them control your thoughts, and you're becoming a slave to whatever it is that they want you to think, whatever it is that they want you to believe. And the fact of the matter is, I think if there's one thing that's probably really, really important to us as human beings, is to live our own life by our own terms. At least to me, that's important. Live our own life by our own terms, which means not letting other people or all these other things out there influence our emotional states without our permission. And so if I don't like feeling angry all the time because it makes me feel bad, or if I don't like feeling frustrated all the time because it takes a lot of energy or whatever else, I can eventually choose to not, I mean, it takes time, but I can eventually choose to look at the situations in a way that don't make me frustrated. Look at the situations in a different way that don't make me angry. Accept them for what they are, or simply remove myself and understand that I have no control over that. So why should I get frustrated about it? Why should I get angry about it? I have no control over that. And now, if I'm going to get that angry about it, then maybe I should put myself in a position to have control over it. Maybe I should run for office. If you're that upset, run for office. If you're that, you know what I mean? Like, if you're going to be upset about it, you might as well do something in that direction. Productive. But otherwise, it's just a waste of emotion on things that you're not going to be able to control. So, I'm going to go ahead and jump off here. Snow day. Have fun. Be warm. Thanks for joining me, Jamal, and who else is on there? Mr. Scott, thank you for jumping on, and Miss DeWitt, thank you for jumping on Instagram. We haven't done these live on Instagram very often because it didn't used to work. And thank you, Tasha and Miss Tidwell, for jumping on our Facebook Live. And remember, you can check out this again. You can re-listen to this and several other topics. I believe I have like 30 episodes now of our podcast by searching your Teammate Talks wherever you get your podcast. So until we see you guys again. Oh, sorry, Mr. Fisher. We're jumping off right as you logged on. But I could say hi anyway. This was all about patience and acceptance and learning to differentiate what's in your control and what's not, so that you can gain back power and your emotional control rather than being a slave to those who would control your thoughts through your own emotions. Anyway, I think it was a good episode. So when we see you guys again, be the best teammates you can be. Be the best at being you.